In this video, we're going to take a look at how to paint a color texture onto this character. We're going to make use of the layer system, which has been vastly improved in ZBrush 4. And along the way, we're going to look at some different brushes and some brush customizations we can use, and just a general approach, a general methodology to painting a creature's skin. So to begin, just load up your character, the detailed final model, and under the tool menu, you're going to find that there's a layers menu. So you want to unroll that layers menu, and you want to make sure you're at your highest subdivision level. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to create a layer for our base color. The base color will be our underpainting. And if we have that on a separate layer, that's going to allow us to go in and have different underpaintings for this character. You'll get a pretty different overall look if your underpainting is a light beige compared to, say, a desaturated purple or green. You can really alter the overall look of the character just by changing up what your underpainting is, because that underpainting is going to affect all the color that goes on top of it, as long as it's not put down at 100% opacity. And it's going to be peeking through in areas where the opacity is low or where you haven't painted over the underpainting. So that first layer is going to really dictate a lot of how the final paint scheme looks. So that's why it's really nice to just, from the beginning, start breaking things up into different layers, and that'll give you a lot of freedom as you're working to go back and experiment with different looks. So we'll click this button here to create a new layer. And it'll pop up right here, Untitled Layer, and it defaults to being in record mode. I'm going to click Name, and I'm going to call this Underpaint or Base Layer. Let's say Base Layer 1. So now you can see we've got Base Layer 1, and any color that I put down on here is going to be recorded into this layer. So let's say, for example, I go to my System Palette. The System Palette button here I've actually customized, I've dragged down into the interface. You'll find it under the Color menu, System Palette right there. So go into the System Palette, and let's begin by just a light beige color. Push it more towards yellow. There we go. Now if I turn on RGB and go to Color, Fill Object, it's going to attempt to fill the object with that color. Sometimes that actually doesn't work because you're working in the layer system. To make sure that you get your color onto the object and record it into the layer, with your standard brush, just turn off Z-Add. RGB is turned on. We've got X Symmetry turned on. If you just click and drag and start painting, and I'm going to undo that, and I'm going to turn off Gradient. Gradient is turned on right now, and that's creating a gradient between the primary and secondary color, and I don't want that. I just want the primary color to be put down. So now you can see it starts painting the primary color. Unfortunately, that fill option doesn't work with the layer menu. Hopefully that's something that Pixelogic will fix in the next version. But this particular implementation of layers is much more powerful than the previous one and a lot more stable. So they're definitely making improvements as each release comes out. And there's some definite big jumps forward with the layers that you see in ZBrush 4. One of the main things you find is just the stability is much higher, and it doesn't add quite as much to your file size if you use layers. There we go. So I've given this guy an overall base color using this this light beige as our underpainting. If I click next to the Record button, it now goes to eyeball mode. It's no longer in record mode. If I turn that eyeball back on, you'll see that that beige pops back up. So this base layer is now in this, or this base color is now in this base layer here. ZBrush has got to think about that for some reason. bring the layer back on, and then we'll save our work. For this tutorial, I'm actually going to save files, ZTools, rather than saving projects. In ZBrush 4, you can actually save projects or you can save ZTools. Just for the ease of this tutorial, I'm just going to save files, since really all I'm working with is polypaint color. I'm not needing to worry about any other data. So I'll click Save As. And we'll save this as Demon Paint 01. So now we've got a base color laid in. I'm going to go back to the Layers menu and create a new layer. And this new layer I'm going to name Base 2. We'll call this base color green. And what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to lay in a different base value. I'm going to go to the System Palette and select a greenish underpainting. And making sure RGB is on the brush, Z-add is turned off. We're just going to paint this in across the whole model. Now what this is going to do, it's going to give us two different options for our underpainting. You can have your underpainting as this beige, which will give you a certain look when it's laying underneath all the color that we put on subsequently to this. Or you can use this green underpainting, which will give a totally different look in some cases to the rest of the painting that you put down. So it's just a way of experimenting with, different color schemes or different color approaches by breaking up your layers into, or breaking up your passes into layers like this. There we go. Now you'll notice that this appears to have covered the beige layer. Well, that's because in the ZBrush layering system, the layer that's on the bottom is the layer that's on top. So if I turn this layer off, you'll see beige is still there. If I turn it back on, you'll see the green covers the beige. If I turn this down in terms of opacity using that slider, you'll see the beige start to peek through. So it's important to keep in mind that the layering system is inverted from what you might expect to see based on Photoshop. The layers going down are the ones that are actually stacked on top. So be sure to keep that in mind. That's the way Pixelogic has set up this layer menu.